The 1990s was an amazing era for the NBA, full of memorable moments. There were several phenomenal players in this era, so it is very difficult to make a list of only 10 names, but here we go. These are the 10 best NBA players from the 1990s. At number 10 is Reggie Miller. Certainly Miller wasn't a phenomenal passer, and he didn't grab many rebounds, but he did score a lot of points, especially from long range. Reggie Miller is one of the best three-point shooters of all time, top 3 undoubtedly. Miller was way ahead of his time, making three-pointers with impressive ease. While he predominantly focused on his jumper, Miller was an above-average defender who knew how to get into his opponent's head, as evidenced by his intense matchups with the New York Knicks and their biggest supporter, Spike Lee. Miller's career was somewhat held back by his inability to lead the Pacers into the NBA Finals by failing 4 times in the Eastern Conference Finals during the 1990s. Even though he couldn't help the Pacers reach the next level, Miller was still a strong leader on the court. And now at number 9 is Patrick Ewing. In the 1990s, Patrick Ewing averaged 24.1 points, 11 rebounds and 2.7 blocks per game, putting up several impressive performances and being one of the league's most consistent players. Ewing did not win any collective or individual awards in the decade, but he was in the top 5 in MVP voting 5 times, and led the New York Knicks to the playoffs every year. And at number 8 is Scottie Pippen. Obviously Michael Jordan gets all the credit and the spotlight, but we can't forget about his faithful squire, Scottie Pippen. In the decade, Pippen averaged 19.2 points, 7.2 rebounds, 5.9 assists and 2.2 steals per game, accumulating a 48.2 value over replacement player. Pippen made 7 All-Star Game appearances and was an 8-time first-team All-Defensive player. Pippen was undoubtedly very important in the Bulls' 6 championships. And now at number 7 on our list is Charles Barkley. Barkley was a real killer on the court, and he was undoubtedly one of the best players of the 1990s, even though he had a noticeable decline in the last third of the decade. In that 10-year span, Sir Charles recorded 22.4 points, 11.6 rebounds, 4.2 assists and 1.5 steals per game, with a 24.6 player efficiency rating and an 43.5 VORP, being named MVP of the 1992-93 season and making 7 All-Star Game appearances. And at number 6 is Shaquille O'Neal. O'Neal was the first overall pick in the 1992 draft, and he did not disappoint at all. In fact, you could say he exceeded expectations. Shaq was Rookie of the Year and quickly established himself as an unstoppable force, one of the most dominant players in the league. In the 1990s, O'Neal averaged 27.1 points, 12.2 rebounds and 2.6 blocks per game. He was scoring champion in the 1994-95 season, and he was selected to the All-Star Game 6 times. O'Neal may not have been the most versatile in the league, but he certainly knew how to make the most of his size, and that's all that mattered for the Big Diesel. It's not often that a player is able to dominate over the span of 2 decades, but O'Neal did just that, and his stranglehold on the NBA started in the 90s. And now at number 5 is Karl Malone. Malone is one of the greatest NBA players to never win a championship ring, but still, he was one of the best players from the 1990s. The Utah Jazz power forward was a beast, one of the most intense players of that era. In 703 games in the 1990s, Malone had averages of 26.8 points, 10.7 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1.4 steals and 0.9 blocks per game, with a 57.9 VORP. The mailman was a 2-time MVP and 9-time All-Star during the 10-year span. And at number 4 on our list is John Stockton. Like Karl Malone, John Stockton never won a championship ring, which is strange considering the two of them formed one of the most lethal duos of all time. In the 1990s, Stockton was the league's best passer in 6 consecutive seasons, averaging 11.6 assists per game, along with 14.7 points and 2.2 steals, with a 57 VORP. In the decade, John Stockton had 8 All-Star Game appearances, taking MVP honors in the 1993 All-Star Game. And at number 3 is David Robinson. Robinson was an exceptional player, a delight to watch. In the 1990s, Robinson averaged 24.4 points, 11.5 rebounds, 3.4 blocks and 1.6 steals per game. He was MVP of the 1994-95 season, Defensive Player of the Year in 1991-92, Rookie of the Year in 1989-90. He was Scoring Champion and Block Champion, was NBA Champion in the 1998-99 season, and had 8 All-Star Game appearances. Obviously, David Robinson was one of the best NBA players of the 1990s, and he has a well-deserved place in the Hall of Fame. And at number 2 on our list is Hakeem Olajuwon. The first overall pick in the 1984 NBA draft met, and perhaps exceeded, expectations. Hakeem Olajuwon had a fantastic career, being at the top of his game during the 1990s. In that decade, Olajuwon averaged 23.9 points, 11.3 rebounds, 3.3 blocks and 1.3 steals per game, being a 3-time block champion, 6-time All-Star, 1993-94 season MVP, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year and 2-time Finals MVP. The Dream was arguably the most dominant player of the 1990s. And at number 1 is Michael Jordan. Jordan was undoubtedly the best NBA player of the 1990s. His airness dominated virtually the entire decade, and the years he didn't dominate, it was because he was retired, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Jordan won 6 championship rings, was a 6-time Finals MVP and 4-time MVP. In the decade, Mike averaged 30.3 points per game in the regular season, with a 62.3 value over replacement player, and averaged 32.9 points per game in the playoffs, with a 28.5 player efficiency rating. Michael Jordan was the one and only. When you consider the talent he went up against, his production looks that much more impressive. 30 points per game, all while shooting above 50% over 8 years, is absolutely unbelievable, and it's something that we may never see again. Jordan never lost an NBA Finals series that he played in. Greatness isn't handed out, it's earned, and that's the story of Jordan's career. His hard work and will to win is why he's the greatest player of the 90s.